Yeah, we're gonna move on to our first speech of today. We have Dr. Anurag Mairal on the call right now. He's currently the president of the SEVA Bay Area chapter. So I do want to talk about SEVA for a little bit, but SEVA is a Hindu faith-based humanitarian nonprofit service organization. They have chapters and members all over the world, so it's SEVA International. Anyone's allowed to join, and they have a LEAD program, which is for high school students. I've been part of the LEAD program for 3 years, and I've been part of SEVA for even longer. I've led a whole lot of projects and helped so many people with the other members. They really helped so much, especially in this pandemic. They've done so much, and we've helped all ages and ranges of people from all different backgrounds. So it's really great. So I encourage you all to check it out. Also, a quick thank you to Rajesh Ji, Guruji, and Jyoti Ji for believing in me and this conference. So now going back to Dr. Anurag Mairal, he's the president of the Bay Area chapter of SEVA International, and he's also an adjunct professor of medicine and the director of the global outreach programs at Stanford Bayer Center for Biodesign. And he's the director of he's the adjunct professor at Stanford's Graduate School of Business and a faculty fellow and lead for technology innovation and impact at the Learning for Innovation in Global Health. In these roles, he's led many initiatives and focused on applying the biodesign process, which he'll be talking more about, to resource-constrained settings globally. So he's here to talk about his experience and hope for the youth. He's one of my mentors, and this has been a huge help, and is also a mentor to the SEVA Youth Design to Lead team, who will also be presenting today. Personally, I've done the Design to Lead team, the Design to Lead program as part of SEVA once, and then I've done it 3 other times as a mentor, including this current session going on. The last session, I asked Dr. Mairal if we could focus on mental health. So I was the mentor for phase 1 of that. And now that we're in phase 2, we're all teammates and have become friends, which is part of that peer-to-peer connection that this conference is all about and Not the End is all about. So I'm excited to hear our team present their findings and hopes for phase 2. Now, please join me in introducing and welcoming Dr. Anurag Mairal.
Well, hello, everybody, and good morning. Thank you for sharing your Sunday with me. Avni, thank you so much for having me as a speaker. And it's a joy to see you put together this event. Really remarkable event. I've looked at the agenda and I've been very impressed by how well put together it looks. And it actually addresses it talks about a very important issue in our society, and how we could come together to address that. And that, in fact, is part of the theme of what I'm about to say. I don't have any slides. I debated quite a bit, as I'm a professor. So professors like to present, to teach. So I always have slides ready for everything. But I didn't want today to be a lecture. I wanted today to be a conversation. And I hope that's okay with you. I would rather engage you all in a conversation. But I wanted to share some thoughts before we sort of got the conversation going. Maybe I can start a little bit by sharing my journey, and then I'll come to the.
I have a question. Is it for parents or kids, this session?
This is a teens only conference right now.
Okay.
Because the parent session is at 12:30.
Okay, it is 12:30 here. Hence, I wanted to check.
Yeah, okay. Looking forward to seeing you there.
Thank you. See you at 12.
Mm-hmm. I apologize.
I'm giving it to my team.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Dr. Mairal, why don't you continue?
Sure, San. So what I'll do is I'll quickly share my journey over a couple of minutes, and then I would love to chat about where I see the world going and what I think is the role of all of you. And I would love to sort of engage in a conversation on the basis of that. So let's get set up for that. Please use chat window as any questions that come up. I'm going to keep them open on my other screen. And I'm actually also going to have the attendee list in the other window. So if anybody wants to raise hands or anything, please feel free to do so. All right. So you already heard what my titles were, but before we get there, let's talk about my journey. I grew up in India. In a small city called Raipur. This is a very rural state in India. It's now a state. It was part of a larger state earlier called Chhattisgarh. Very rural, very tribal. Just 150 kilometers from my home is the largest tribal area in India. So I saw underserved communities all around me. I grew up around them, and that actually, in a way, became the setting for the work that I do today. So you'll see there's always a circle always closes, a loop always closes. You'll see that in your own lives as well. So I grew up in India. I did my undergraduate education in that city, and then I came to IIT Bombay, which is one of the leading institutions in India for my master's, and then I came to the US for my PhD. All of this was in chemical engineering, my undergrad, master's, PhD, and at the University of Colorado at Boulder. And then I did a couple of postdoctoral fellowships, one in Europe and one in Michigan, before I moved to the Bay Area. I moved to the Bay Area in 1998 to join a very interesting small company called Membrane Technology and Research, where I led a research group, a product development group, focused on membrane technology for bioseparations. So that was my start of my industrial career, if you will. And for the following 8 years, I worked on various technologies. I sort of worked with a lot of biotechnology companies in developing these solutions. And then I got my MBA, and that really changed the way I thought about the world. Until then, I was a researcher focused mainly on these academic ideas and very research-focused ideas. The MBA actually gave me a perspective about the world that I did not have. It told me about how the commercial world works, how pricing works, what the global strategy is all about, how if you look at last 2,000 years of our society's, modern society's evolution, each century has belonged to a different country. So these are the kinds of perspectives that I gained when I was doing my MBA. And after my MBA, I joined Johnson & Johnson, which is a major medical technology healthcare company, the largest in the world. And there I focused more on business side of things. Before that, I was doing our product development, but I focused on business side of things, help me understand healthcare systems, the patients, the communities a lot better. And in 2007, I joined Stanford faculty, Stanford School of Medicine, which is where I am today. I also took a sabbatical for a couple of years to go work at a very large NGO called PATH, which works in global health, which is an area of my expertise and my passion. A lot of my ideas come from my work in global health, which focuses healthcare in places like Ghana and Kenya and all the under-resourced settings around the world. But I would argue what happens here in the US, in COVID-19, we have global health settings right here in our own backyard. And I'll come back to that during our conversation. I have been an entrepreneur as well. I've started 3 companies so far. My latest company is called Orbeez Medical, which is a strategy consulting firm. So I split my time between Stanford and Orbeez Medical. And as Avani mentioned, I have been involved with Seva for the last 3 years. And I am currently the Bay Area president. And so I have a social, commitment side as well to the work I do. And I think it's all aligned. One thread running through this entire journey of mine that I can share is that it's been a journey of self-discovery. I knew what my strengths were when I was in school, college, my graduate school. But I did not know what made me me. I did not know what my true sort of identity or my true self was. And the following 20 years of professional journey that I've had, In my early 40s, I started to realize where my real sort of self lay. And that has been last 10 years, I would say, I'm 51 today. Last 10 years have been a remarkable phase of my life where I've understood not only what my strengths were, but also what my passions or what made me tick, what made me happy. And I today, everything I do in my career is basically that. But it took me this much time. It took me 40 years of my life to actually get to that point. Hopefully all of you take a little less time, and that's what I'm going to be talking a little bit about. That's kind of my journey. The second thing I wanted to share with you is where the world is. And I would love to hear your inputs on this one. So can you guys share with me what you think are the biggest challenges our society faces today or the next 5 to 10 years? What are the biggest challenges that we are going to be dealing with that are already showing up today, but we'll be dealing with them for next decade or so? And please, you go ahead and use the chat window to type in your responses. And I'll start with one right away. Health inequity, a major area of my work, is going to be a super critical challenge for us. And we already seen during COVID-19, if you notice, we have had lots of challenges in US and Europe, but the folks within these countries, within these regions that have been impacted the most have been people from the underserved communities, people of color, frontline workers who have no other option but to do that work. The most vulnerable, the ones with a lot of comorbidities, the seniors in our community, those without the healthcare. Those are the ones who have been impacted the most. And I would argue this story repeats itself globally, actually. So that's one challenge. I'm seeing some responses here. Xenophobia, racism. Yes, racial inequity is a very critical part of it. Homophobia, absolutely. Gender and sexual identity is a big challenge for our society and sort of maintaining equity and justice around that. The division within our communities. Global warming, absolutely. And I would argue that global warming is not disconnected from health. I mean, my field of work is health, right? That's my primary focus, but there's a new center coming up at Stanford called Planetary Health. I don't think it's confidential. I think I can say this publicly, that this center is actually planetary and human health. It actually makes a connection between what happens in the air, what happens in water, what happens with our fire, our forest burning, the forest fires, what happens with our flood systems. Basically, all of them are connected with human health and animal health. So planetary health and human health are connected, absolutely. It's let's see, unequal access to healthcare, absolutely. That's exactly, health equity is a big part of it. Yeah, please keep them coming. But there are a number of challenges. Social inequity is a huge issue. There's a book, actually, I think I have that book here. I'll share that with you. This book written by Anand Giridhar. If you have had a chance to read this, that's great. If not, you may want to check this out. It's called Winners Take All. And Winners Take All is really about economic inequity that exists, how the opportunities. It's a very dramatic book, and some of the ideas there may be too extreme, but they are important ideas. What it talks about is how much economic inequity exists and how much of that is systemic in nature. It's not about any individual being a bad apple or whatever. It's actually our systems are set up in such a way that all of these inequities exist. And I think we are now at a place in our society's evolution that these inequities have gotten too extreme, and they don't need to exist, given how we have actually democratized knowledge, how we have there's a book that came out about 15 years back called The World is Flat. It talked about how somebody living in India could actually have access to the same knowledge that somebody living here or somebody living in Mongolia or other place, thanks to the technology, and could potentially play similar role in this new knowledge economy. While that is true still, and it's been true for a while, it hasn't led to an even distribution of wealth, of progress, of health, of education liberty and all of the ideas that we consider to be human ideas. So what that means, the reason I'm bringing that up is we are at a juncture in our society where tremendous progress has happened. Some remarkable things have happened in the last 20, 30, 40 years that are unprecedented in nature, and the pace of change in the society has been pretty dramatic. We talk about artificial intelligence. There's a book by Eric Topol called Deep Medicine, talks about how AI will make medicine deep. Right now, the medicine that we see is shallow, where a doctor sees a patient for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 7 minutes, 8 minutes at the most. And that's not enough time, right? AI will make that deeper, where you will have a deeper context to what patient is coming in with. So AI has tremendous potential, but AI also has a dark side where many of the algorithms could potentially be encoded, who could have encoded the biases that exist in our society today. Access to healthcare is one of them. So if you are a part of a community that gets decent access, our data then gets used to create these algorithms, which means artificial intelligence systems that will be in place in the future would actually have those biases already set in. So I think there are some remarkable things that have happened in our society, but there are many new challenges that have come up. What that means is that your generation will likely have to equip yourself to contend with these challenges. Fortunately, a lot of these tools exist, and design thinking is one such tool. And you'll hear a little bit about that from the team that will be presenting that has worked on this mental health topic using design thinking. Design thinking is essentially understanding the problem from the user's perspective. Rather than thinking about, oh, I got this really cool app and I want to apply it to this particular problem. It's more about, let's understand the problem first. Let's understand the problem in its full glory, and then think about what interventions or what solutions would be needed for that particular problem. It kind of turns the solution on its head by focusing first on the problem, on the users or the beneficiaries first. It's called user-centric design. It's called design thinking. And the program I'm part of at Stanford, Biodesign, actually leverages that methodology. It's rooted in that methodology, where there are 3 steps: identify the unmet need, invent a solution around it, and then implement it. And there's a lot of discipline that's required in understanding the problem first. Why do I want to talk about design thinking with you today is I feel that all of these major challenges that we are talking about, pretty much every one of us, adults, people like me, are really tackling pieces of the problem. I just talked about planetary and human health. Honestly, if we just talk about human health, and that too in like specific, like cardiovascular health or lung health, we are going to be missing the bigger systemic picture because, for example, we know that pollution kills millions of people every year. And the way it kills is it affects the lungs, affects the heart, actually it starts to show up in the blood as well, right? So it affects the entire vascular system, potentially can affect the neurovascular system as well. So you now have these connective tissues running between different types of problems that we are talking about. And I think we need to change that by understanding the problem much more deeply and then thinking about the solution. And I think because all of you in your generation haven't yet been inculcated in our way of thinking, our generation's way of thinking, you could actually use this toolkit, this design thinking framework, to understand the problem better. And remarkable thing that happens when you understand the problem, you're able to break it down into smaller chunks. You're able to address these problems, the large problem, understanding the full connectivity across different pieces of the problem, but then address one component of the problem at a time, knowing where you're ultimately trying to go. So it makes things at the same time more comprehensive and easier to deal with. I'll share a couple of data points with you, and then we'll take questions. Your generation is going to see 17 job changes in your lifetime. My generation, 5. My parents' generation, 1. They had one job all their life. My generation, I've already had 4 or 5 jobs in my own career. I probably won't change my jobs anymore. I'll probably continue to do the same things in different ways. Your generation, you're gonna see 17 changes in you. That means during your professional life, every 3 years, you're gonna have 2 to 3 years, you're gonna have a different job, which will require different set of skills. Here's another data point. Most of the jobs that exist today, half of those jobs that exist today will not be there in another decade. Half the jobs, which means jobs themselves are going to evolve. There'll be new kinds of jobs, that would be coming up, which we don't know about today. What that means is you need to become facile at or adapt at learning new skills on the go. The iterative learning is going to have to be part of it. And design thinking in a way helps you sort of keep tabs on what those changes are in the society and what sort of skills you may need. The last thought, and then let's take some questions. My recommendation to you all is that you focus less on what sort of courses you want to do or what sort of schools you want to go, but focus a lot more on what sort of challenges that you want to address. Because once you have understood the challenges that you want to address, the problems that fascinate you, you would have a lifetime of an opportunity to learn new skills, new tools, and apply that to that problem. The 40 years of journey that I talked about that brought me to a point where I realized who I was. I realized that social equity and social justice is a key focus for me. Education was a major focus for me, and health was a focus for me. And what I really wanted to do was engage with the society, understand its challenges, and make an impact. So everything I do in my professional life actually relates to these themes. I wish I had discovered that in my 20s or even in high school. I probably would have gotten to this point faster. What my recommendation to you all would be to get on that self-discovery sooner rather than later. Focus less on the superficial, which school exactly do you go to? It's important to know which school you want to go to, but why you want to go to that school should be clear as well. And that is this journey of self-discovery. And my recommendation would be that you start with design thinking as a tool. So I'm going to stop here. There's a lot more that we can talk about, and hopefully we'll be able to do this in person at some point. You have a remarkable opportunity. Your generation is amazing. I've been mentoring high school students for the last 3-4 years. And I've been so impressed by your capabilities, your ethics, your value system, the way you think about the world. You teach me something every day, which is saying something. They say you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but I learn new tricks every time I talk to one of you, which means that you are very well set to address many of these challenges. And the future is bright, in my opinion, and I think you all will be. Will actually create that future. That's my hope. I wouldn't worry about what happens tomorrow or what happens after tomorrow. I wouldn't worry about temporary setbacks. The temporary setbacks are actually building blocks for that future. So be comfortable with the discomfort of things evolving all the time. That's the future you're gonna be contending with anyway. And it's not a bad thing to have, because you will never be bored of doing things that you're doing. You'll always have something new to do. So with that, let's take some questions. And how much time do we have, Avni, before we hand it over to the Design to Lead team?
We have a few more minutes until then. Okay. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. I allow participants to unmute themselves. And everyone's been pretty active in the chat if you would like to check it out. There's a lot of great discussion going on. Yeah.
I had a question. I know in your talk, you talked about how the mindset within our generation is much different from the older generations. I was wondering, I'm like, obviously with the different mindsets, that means there's going to be a lot of disagreements on how to handle things. What would you say is like maybe the best or most effective way to like address the difference in mindsets in order to like as a younger generation, how can we like get the older generation to like look at it through our lens and then see our perspective and our solution?
Yeah, I have two-part answer to that question, Sienna. First part is, frankly, the future is going to be defined by you. So while the older generation matters, it may not matter as much in the long term. So that's one comment I'll make right away. And that's not to say, please don't pay attention to what we are saying, but it's to say that you are creating that future. So it's very important to think about what kind of future you want to create. You don't want it to be biased by what has happened so far, because in many ways we haven't done a good job of addressing those things. So that's one comment I'll make. The second is empathy. Empathy, design thinking is rooted in empathy. The first step in that we will see design thinking framework, there are 5 steps. The first step is empathize. It's very important. I think the lot of challenges that we see in our society today is that lack of empathy. We don't really put ourselves, and empathy is different from sympathy. I'm not talking about sympathy. For the longest time, the global development, global health work, for example, was all about sympathy. Oh, those poor kids in Africa. That was the mindset. It shouldn't be that. It should be more about what do those kids actually experience? Like, be there in their shoes, right? Similarly, if you're talking about older generation versus your generation, it's really about how does the older generation think about these things, these issues, get into their shoes. That'll help you create the language to communicate with them your ideas. So one thing that I hear from South Asian communities is about attitude towards racism, attitude towards, for example, Black Lives Matter. And there's a major sort of pushback amongst the older generation, my generation, against the Black Lives Matter movement, for example. And a lot of this was rooted in the knowledge that they had and the perspectives they had. But your generation has a different perspective about it. You are far more supportive of that movement. And I think understanding where the previous generation came from and the misconceptions they may have had, and actually addressing those misconceptions rather than setting it up as a conflict between old and the new, like you guys are just racist and we are not. I think that's a wrong way to frame it, because their point of view has come from a very different place. It's come from a very different education. So that's an example of how, having empathy, empathy but not sympathy, understanding where they're coming from, putting yourselves in their shoes, and then thinking about the language that would address specific elements of their point of view would be important. And that applies to red state versus blue states, and left versus right in our own country as well.
Thank you for answering our question.
Of course. Any other questions? Maybe
Dr.
one
Mairal, I have a question that we've talked about before that I think is so valuable for everyone else to hear that I'm just going to ask it in this space so everyone else can hear. But my kind of question that keeps me up at night is that I think in my parents, and we've talked about past generations, I think a lot of the focus is on like a work-life balance and how do you create a happy work-life balance. But the kind of things that you were talking about is we might have 17 different career changes throughout our lives. So is the future looking more towards creating a career that you are passionate about versus working for the sake of working and creating happiness outside of your job? Does that kind of make sense?
That makes perfect sense, Pooja. Thank you so much for that question. That's a great segue, and I would love to spend time on it. I think the point that I made about my 40 years of journey and coming to the point that I did about 10 years back, I can remember the time period that I arrived at that juncture. Actually, I have created my career opportunities after that. Everything I do today, these are jobs that I created. I mean, they somewhat existed, but it's been really, I have defined those jobs, and I could not have been happier in my life. I worked extremely hard, but every minute that I spent is full of joy. And that's the point. I think once you understand who you are, and you pursue that who you are and what makes you tick, happiness presents itself, and it's no longer about work-life balance. It's no longer about the stress of the work and so on, because it's not work anymore, right? So my recommendation to you all is, don't take it to an extreme, but start thinking about what makes you tick and start to create, because I think the future is so fluid and it's going to evolve so much. In a way, what you do today will define what happens tomorrow, right? So creating the kinds of roles or careers, designing those careers for yourselves that actually align with what your skills are, but also where your interests are, is actually a very smart way, a very good way to make yourself relevant, make yourself happy, and also design the future that you want. It's a win-win all around when you do that.
All right. I think that's all we have time for today.
That's
But thank
great.
you, Dr. Mairal, for being here, and Save International and Josna G and everyone else has been incredible help. I know you do have another meeting to go to right now, specifically a design to lead meeting. So we'll be looking forward to speaking with you more later. And another round of applause for Dr. Anurag Mairal.